I met Brian in about 1992 when he was a student in our media program. He took courses for a couple of years, then left school to go to work at the local NBC affiliate TV station. Brian was a videographer for the news department for about 15 years. After several years of hearing or seeing nothing of Brian, I received an email which identified its sender as Brianna Wynonna. But in the message, the sender identified himself as Brian. He was inquiring about what courses he still needed to complete to earn his associate degree. We exchanged a few more emails in which I explained what he needed to do to finish up. I really didn't understand the Brianna Wynonna return address, but I didn't ask. I thought maybe it was his wife's or girlfriend's account. A few months later, I was standing in the doorway of my colleague's office. When I turned and looked down the hallway, I wasn't really prepared for what I saw. There was Brian's unmistakable face, but everything else was woman. It was Wynonna. He had long reddish hair, he was wearing makeup, a tight-fitting animal print dress, and very high heels. And he had a very unladylike gait. I was so shocked that I avoided making eye contact by turning back to my colleague and continuing our conversation. Over the next few months, I would catch glimpses of Brian Wynonna, but we never really talked. I would wave from a distance. I was ducking him. Then one day I turned a corner and we were face to face. I was very uncomfortable while we made some small talk. I could not bring myself to ask the question I really wanted to ask. In my head, a voice was screaming, "Dude, you're a chick!" Other students passing by saw us talking, and a few weeks later I was cornered by a small group of female students who were pretty upset about Brian Wynonna using the women's restroom. They figured if I knew him, I knew about his gender. But they were wrong. I was as confused as they were. I decided it was time to finally sit down with Brian Wynonna and ask him the questions that were apparently in several people's minds.
Well, it's GBLT issues are something a person is born with. I mean, it is genetic. It has been traced back to, it has been traced back to genetics. And, when we first talked, you were saying choices, it's not a choice, but if you want to use the word choice, your choice is to either come out and be the person you knew you were meant to be, or you can hide it in the closet, as it were, and be miserable.
So when I met you 20 years ago, there was a part of you that was miserable.
Very much so.
And when did you stop being miserable?
I think it was about '09, give or take. It's like, a lot of people, like, you just reach a point where it's like, you can't live this lie anymore, and you just got to go with it.
Well, tell me about how that happened. I mean, how did you start? How did the process unfold?
Well, I mean, I've always had this part of me. It's just I've always, up until then, I just kind of kept it hidden from the world, more or less. And I guess one day I just, when I met my fiance, she was starting to move in with me, and she came home a little early one time, but I mean, she knew, all about it, and she's like, well, let's go out to eat, basically. I'm like, shouldn't I? She's like, you passed, don't worry about it. And so we went to Captain D's, nobody gave me a second look, and then we went to Walmart afterwards, nobody gave me a second look. And, you know, I just, after that point, I'm like, yeah, this is, you know, it's just kind of snowballed after that.
You're happier?
Oh, yeah, a lot. A lot.
Is there a downside to it?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. There's like anything, there's always a downside.
This is not a very, in my experience, this is not a very accepting, liberal kind of a community.
And you know, that very fear that you just mentioned was the thing that was the reason I stayed hidden for so long, that fear. And you know, once I got out and just kind of learned that fear is just kind of like that old saying, the only thing you have to fear is fear yourself. Fear itself, you know?
So, I mean, tell me what that must have been like that first night when she said, let's go out to eat. You pass. Were you freaking out?
I was nervous. I was apprehensive. I was like, crap, what if I get read? You know, what if I get read by some grain-fed redneck with a Bowie knife in his pocket, you know? And, you know, it just never happened. And
Wait.
I do get read.
I was just going to say.
I do. I mean, I do get read.
Okay.
Sometimes. And but you know what? Usually people just smile and go on. And it's usually women that read me first. You know, they'll read me quicker than anybody, but and usually they just smile and go on.
So do you have a network? I mean, do you have a support group that?
Mostly online right now,
Okay.
because like you said before, Zanesville is such a conservative community. There's not a lot in Zanesville, but so for me, it's mostly online. There's a huge online support group.
Now,
There's a huge online community. You'd be surprised.
I probably would. How does this relate to sexual orientation versus outward manifestation?
Some would say it doesn't.
I mean, you have a fiance
Yes.
who is female.
Yes. Genetically female, yes.
And you're genetically male.
Genetically.
Right. So tell me about your sex life. Are you homosexual?
Absolutely not.
So you're a heterosexual male, genetically male.
Genetically. I prefer to think of myself as a misassigned lesbian. Is how I prefer to think of myself. And believe it, there are a lot of us out there. Again, the aforementioned online support networks, if one spends any time on that, you will find that people like me are a dime a dozen, really. And, you know, I think the biggest problem towards understanding among people that are not part of the community is the fact that so many people are in the proverbial closet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, there are so many people that stay, and it's just not out there, you know? And I think, you know, society has lightened up a lot in recent years, and I think as more and more people start to come out, and people get used to seeing different people out there, you know, it'll...
Even in Zanesville.
I have a saying that I like to use on the online forums. the more commonplace we make ourselves, the more commonplace we'll become.
Tell me about getting ready to go out.
I have thrown myself together in as quick as an hour. But if I'm going to dress to the nines to go to a fancy something or other, I would like to have 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah.
So here's, I think,
Like I say, if I'm like going to if I'm going to go to a banquet or something, you know, that's the high end of the scale. But on average, you know, like I say, I have thrown myself together in as quick as an hour.
Is the process, how do I say this? Is the process, the getting ready, is that a part of the, I mean, do you derive satisfaction from that part as much as the finished product?
I never really thought about it. To be honest with you, it just never occurred to me one way or the other. I look at it as fixing something that's not right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just never really thought about the process so much as just like you just do it. You just, again, I guess it's like when I was talking earlier about things being commonplace. It's just so commonplace to me now. I just don't think about it.
When did you start dressing as a woman?
As long as I can remember.
Really? Since childhood?
Yes, yes.
You know, you sneak into your mom's dresser, or
That's how 90% of it, or 99% of it get started. Yeah.
99%?
Borrowing from their mothers or sisters or whatever.
But you didn't have a sister.
No.
So I mean, honestly, I want an answer now. What's your earliest recollection? Were you grade school, middle school, what?
As long as I can remember. I'll say some of my earliest memories.
Interesting.
I've known something was not right. Is the best way I can say it. I can't put a definite number on it.
Okay. That's
I can just say some of my earliest memories are of, you know, something's not right.
So if I ask you to put a label on yourself, what's the label?
Misassigned lesbian. Is that what you're asking?
I'll take that. I was thinking like in the, you know, when I am not a scholar of LGBT nomenclature, but, you know, when I hear of people who are transvestite, transsexual, transgender, I mean, you've told me you're interested in women.
Oh, yes.
So if I make you put a label on, one of those conventional labels, which one do you pick?
Oh, transgender. Transgender.
Are you seeking a sex change?
It could happen. It's very cost prohibitive.
Oh, like what?
Huh?
Like what? Like how much?
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but once you squeeze me tight, you need